very important because obviously asymptomatic spread has been one of the major drivers of this whole pandemic, and having a trial that shows that you can decrease that really is what it would take to break the back of this pandemic. One thing that made this challenging with these trials is that the way they determine if someone had COVID-19 or tested for that is if they had symptoms. So, kind of written into the protocol, a person would call you, ask you, how are you feeling? And if you felt fine, you wouldn't have to come in for testing. If you had like fever, cough, any of those symptoms, then you came in, you got swabbed, and that's how they picked up on their COVID cases. So, by definition, they weren't looking at people who had potentially asymptomatic infection and did not have symptoms. So that was one thing that we were always concerned about. Now, the interesting thing about the Moderna trial, they had actually hinted at this when they were kind of talking about their data in the press release, that there's a hint towards a decrease in asymptomatic carriage. So this is what they did. This vaccine, the Moderna one, is 28 days apart from dose one to dose two. Pfizer's 21 days. But what Moderna did, people who came on that second visit, on the visit to get their second dose, they actually did a nasopharyngeal swab. They actually tested them for COVID, regardless of whether they had symptoms or not. Now, what they found were they had a difference in the rate of asymptomatic COVID in the people who had the vaccine versus not. Specifically, it was 38 cases in the placebo, and the placebo were the people who got the sham shot. They found 38 cases in those people who came back for their second dose. But if you received the vaccine, it was 14 recipients who received the who had positive swabs for COVID-19. That correlates to a 67% reduction in asymptomatic infection, and that's just after receiving one dose. Because remember, they came on this visit to get their second dose, so this before you even get the full effect of the vaccine. So the thought is, if you see that reduction just after the first dose, and you get the second dose, strong possibility that you would decrease that number even further by a higher percent. Now, the thing I'll point out, just a lot, we're scientists here, the physicians up here, that is a small number of cases to make a sort of brand statement like that. This was a trial of 30,000 people or so, and we're talking about 50 cases of COVID-19 asymptomatic carriers. So I'd like to see more data, and that's going to be collected as time goes on. But there is a suggestion that asymptomatic carriage can be decreased with this.
And to just add on what Tyson said, if you want to look at this actual data, what Tyson's referring to is a press release it was a descriptive analysis that came a little bit earlier on. But when Moderna released all of their data to the FDA, you can literally Google Moderna briefing document on Google. All of the stuff that Tyson's talking about is on page 28 of the report, and it shows this correlation.
Can you say that again? Where can I find that?
It's page 28 of the Moderna briefing report for the FDA. You can find all of this on there.
Okay, and because that was basically my fear, my hesitancy, because if the vaccine is not preventing transmission and people spreading it, we just having less and less symptoms, the shutdowns are not going to end. We're still going to be in this rabbit hole because it's still going to spread.
It's a good point, Aziz. Somebody should be able to answer that, actually. So give please give Aziz why he should get vaccinated and how it becomes a protective cocoon, in a sense, even with the data that you all just mentioned.
I feel like I could take it. I think I'm like kind of gonna have to jump out in a second, but part of getting vaccinated too is that you kind of don't want the virus to jump into like so many bodies, and like that's like how it's infectious, right? So when we start in vaccinating people, when they get infected with it, it doesn't become as severe, and then also like you're not gonna like be spreading it like as many people, because everyone's now gonna be vaccinated. They're gonna not spread it as hard, because what we've seen even with other vaccines is like you've seen these diseases that were super infectious, that like smallpox, chickenpox, polio, and with vaccines we don't see those diseases anymore, and that's why we even have skeptics now. you don't see polio. You don't see what it looks like to have polio. And I think it's honestly it comes from a place of privilege too, to be able to like now be able to be skeptical of vaccines. When there was a point where we didn't have a choice but to take it because it was killing people at such young ages. Before vaccines were implemented, the average life expectancy was 20 years old. It is now after they were implemented, people are living up to 75 years old. That is like that's what's happened with vaccines. And so like I think we should also look at history of how it has been able to eradicate a lot of infectious diseases. And I think when we start looking at it in that way too, we can see how like effective vaccines have been. And that is why like public health considers vaccines to be one of the best things that we have like created.
Dr. Gadir, she was on here earlier, and she has a really, really good just example or analogy, just to like put it in the lay terms. It's like if you have a group of people that are circling like one person, right? And if you want to consider that one person, either somebody who doesn't want to get vaccinated, but more importantly, it's somebody who can't get vaccinated because they're immunocompromised. And if that person's in the middle of a circle of people who have been vaccinated, right, the disease isn't going to be able to get through that circle to that person in the middle, right? And whether it's they're not getting the disease at all, or they're getting the disease and they're having less symptoms, that is also going to decrease transmission, so it can't get to that person. So if you ask a lot of the people who are on this panel the why they're getting the vaccine, a lot of it is because they have older family members who are immunocompromised, or they take care of patients who are immunocompromised and they can't get the vaccine, right? So we're trying to protect those people. We're like their circle so that the disease doesn't like penetrate.
Can I just respond to that? Because I'm gonna get the source right. The Associated Press, I think the article title is from November, and Tony Fauci, in that article from the Associated Press, Dr. Fauci expresses that the vaccine doesn't prevent us from transmitting it. And just how you guys stated earlier, we still have to, for a certain amount of period of time, we still have to wear masks, we still have to social distance. And so I just want to be very clear. You guys know that this vaccine prevents transmission.
Nobody said that. They've answered that question clearly.
So
No.
it does.
The big answer is no. The big answer is no. We don't have that answer yet. I think Dr. Tyson elaborated, and we just need to be more direct in yes or no answers if that's better for you. And Hisham also commented on it. And I think with Kimberly's analogy, I thought that was clear. Yes, we don't have that. We don't have that answer right now. We're looking at it. Yes, there may have been some evidence that it may have decreased maybe the viral load. So let's say you're supposed to get 200 virins that will be in your nostrils after you got the vaccine and it didn't enter your body. Now you come in contact with somebody else, it may not transmit to them significantly, or it might be a lesser load that they get exposed to. So we can't say definitively transmission is blocked, but it may be reduced, and there's a maybe.
And and that brings me to more hesitancy, because if it's not preventing transmission, I feel like the vaccine should be more developed, and it's not just brought out to us. I feel like I feel like shutdown should be more enforced, because other countries, I don't feel like a vaccine right now is necessary. And I feel like more shutdowns can be enforced upon us, and more money could be given to American citizens that would incentivize us to stay in our homes. Because the vaccine right now, I feel like the vaccine needs to be more developed and tested before we just give it out to the people.
You
And
have some partial
and I
truth
would
with
take
that,
it though.
Aziz.
And I would take it if I feel like it was more developed and tested. Because not only is coronavirus 2 a novelty, this vaccine is a novelty.
Okay,
So I
wanna
think the block
chime
here is that
in. Go ahead,
you
Tyson.
know science works in a very deliberative fashion, right? And it takes rigorous studies in order for you to make declarative statements like this vaccine prevents this. So until scientifically we can prove that in a large scale study that it definitively decreases transmission or stops it, we can't say as physicians or scientists or immunologists, a yes or no answer. And that's what's been so frustrating about the pandemic, because a lot of this has been the science is gray, and that's the reality of science. And so, for us to be up here and say, we think, definitively it stops asymptomatic transmission, scientifically, that's not proven yet. So we can't say yes. We can give all these sorts of theories and studies and say, we think it probably does. That's true. But we can't say that with certainty. So, that's what's been so frustrating, I think, about this is that, science does move slow. This has moved relatively quickly. But we just have to be careful before we make a statement that something definitively works or not. We just have to make sure that we back it up with science.
And Aziz, I would say just with what Dr. Tyson says, so we're giving you the bottom line, and you're well within your right to now, based on that information, if that doesn't make you feel comfortable, it is okay for you feeling some type of way. But what we've tried to be clear about is the cocoon effect and the facts that we're getting more data. If it's decreasing viral load and it may decrease transmission, we got to take what may possibly help. But I think you can think about that in the sense of the doctor, okay? I hope that kind of helps you. I want to make sure it's not that we're blowing you off. We want to take some more questions, but if there's some folks you want to DM or directly continue to have this conversation with, even some of our immunologists, that may be helpful. But we're going to keep it real and give you the facts. We don't know; it's not as clear yet, and those are facts you need to know.
I do want to add though too that we also should be, even though I know you're saying that the vaccine came very fast and like it was just so quickly, I do want to note that, it's not other. There are a lot of independent like researchers that have to verify and make sure that what the data says it is like the same. And so I would also, so I don't think you should think, oh, it's just the government that just like did this vaccine and they're the only ones who tested it. There were a lot of other research companies all over the country that also had to test it and make sure and verify the data as well. Um, and I'm not really sure what other points were made because I kind of just popped back in. And if you want to speak to me about it, I can send you the resources. You can also get some resources from Dr. Azza and pass them on to you as well because I think I know you want to go into medicine and I want you to be like still encouraged to go into it. I don't want you to. I think like it's good to be skeptical, but also like you should be looking at the data and not think that they're like cutting corners because that's not what happened.
No, I greatly, highly appreciate all the information that you guys been given, and I will look at that 28 page on Moderna, and thank you for the time and allowing me to speak.
Thanks, Aziz.
No
You're a
problem.
boxer. That's interesting. So you're adding that to your bio. Very, very interesting. Anyway, take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Aziz. We greatly appreciate you just, feeling like this is a safe space to be able to share. So, I don't know, Kimberly, if you had a question before we move on, because the last person in the room before we head out, because we're going to close this at 5. I know Dr. Yolande says she has some things to take care of. Is Linda Luna. Kimberly, if you didn't have a question.
I don't have a question, so you can go on to.
Okay, well, Miss Linda Luna, if you have a question.
Hi, thanks, guys. I appreciate all the information. It's very informative. I am 43 years old. I'm actually a COVID survivor myself, and I got it back in July, and I actually got that with double pneumonia, I was told. So I was in the hospital for about a week and a half, and a couple of questions I have. I'm going to just kind of tell you the backstories before I go into the questions because it leads into that. But when I was in the hospital, they gave me a combination of a couple of different medicines through the IV as well as through the breathing treatment. And so the names of them, and the reason I'm going to say them because I have questions about some of that with the vaccine. One of them was called Remdesivir. It's like an antiviral, they said. The other one was called Lovenox, and the other one was called Dexamethasone, which I think is the steroid. When I was in there, obviously I thought I was going to die because I literally, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't walk. It was really, really pretty intense for me. And so they were going to give me a plasma transfusion, like an antibodies transfusion, but I was able to recover, thank God, without having to go through the transfusion. And one thing that I say that did help me was the breathing. I think it's like a breathing steroid treatment where I want to say like every other hour I was on this little breathing machine, and it was like lasted 15 minutes. It was kind of cold. I think that's the steroid, which kind of helped clear some of the mucus and stuff, in my lungs or whatnot to help the breathing airways. But now, I haven't taken an antibody test. I don't know if I should take that before taking a vaccine because I don't know if I'm still immune. I haven't, gotten sick or anything like that. But one thing about me is that I get the flu every year. Like I never taken a flu shot, and not because I'm against it per se, because I've, took vaccines, growing up. My son took vaccines, so I believe to an extent with, some of the vaccines that help. But I just never been one to take it just because I just deal with the flu. And, obviously this one was different, it's because it's COVID. And so my question is, um, what, because you guys are saying that it's not guaranteed to prevent it, should I take an antibodies test first? Is that something that's still there? And then in terms of plasma, um, I don't hear anybody talking about that anymore. So is that something that's still relevant or helpful, for that? Because I just heard the story the other day. I don't know if you got the actor Tiny Lister Debo from the movie Friday. He just died, and they said he was having complications again that were similar to COVID. So he had COVID before. So for me, I'm just thinking to myself, like, what if that happens to me because it's flu season and I get the flu all the time? So I'm just kind of like, I'm a little skeptical of the vaccine, especially some of the reasons that you guys are talking about. But I'm also, at the same time, somewhat supportive because of the fact that, I felt like the hospital saved me with some of the things they gave me. So I'm just trying to figure that out, what not I mean, I know you guys can't give me too much recommendations because you're not my doctor, but just trying to, get some more clarity on the vaccination itself, for someone like me. Like, should I take antibody tests? And also, like, is someone like me who's taking vitamin D now, I work out every day, I hike. I just came back from Hawaii for being there a month and a half. After the doctor cleared me, it took me about 2 months for me to get clear of pneumonia. I had it went from my right lung. I'm sorry, it was in my both lungs, and then it kind of went away in the right. It took about 2 months to kind of clear from the left one. And so I still have a somewhat little breathing problem, not too much, kind of like